Hi everyone, I'm back with another video that's different from my usual content. I've been experimenting a lot lately, following the request of a few people who asked me to share some feedback, a review of the mistakes I've made. So yeah, it's different because usually I like to make videos where I share techniques, feedback on things I do and that I know work. And because I've always thought it was interesting to share what works. And a lot of people tell me that mistakes can be useful too, so I totally agree with that. So today I'm going to share with you some of the mistakes I've made. It's been 10 years since I started here. And I can tell you that yes, I've made mistakes. I've made a lot of them and I still make them almost every day. That's how we actually learn, and that's how today I hope I'll be able to share a few little tips with you. So here we go with my mistakes from 10 years of so-called permaculture. First, quick reminder for those who don't know me, I hate being put in a box. I love the word permaculture because I like and I'm interested in its philosophy, but I don't want to say I'm completely in the permaculture box. Simply for the reason that it seems to me that permaculture is not always well understood, that it's something very global and that it's not just related to gardening, just the production of resources, vegetables or plants or animals or whatever. It's not just agricultural, it's much broader than that. Anyway, off topic, maybe I'll discuss that someday. Here are my mistakes from the past 10 years. 10 years ago I arrived here, but I'll broaden this since I did a few things. I'm in the dome in the Zapote at Le Jardin des Merveilles. Before Le Jardin des Merveilles, I worked next door at the farm, just 300 meters behind here. And I already started making mistakes over there, so I'll also tell you about some of those. So first I tried to group together my biggest mistakes a bit. So I think maybe I'll regularly make these kinds of videos where I'll talk about my small mistakes. Here I'll share the major mistakes I've made over 10 years that I still remember. I've made many mistakes like that, and the first batch will include everything. This is a bit related to design. In permaculture they say it's good to organize yourself a little. To establish zoning, make Zone 0 the center of your project, such as the house or main living area. And then we rarely visit the farther zones. They say it's best to start small and slow, close to Zone 0. When I arrived, I didn't know much about design concepts and just did whatever. I already started by making it too big. I have land that's 2 hectares in total. And I thought, this is great. I started planting trees very far apart from each other. There must have been maybe 20 meters between each tree because I didn't have many. I decided to plant trees throughout the land, so they're everywhere. I thought I'd have a sprawling forest, but the trees survived, so it's fine. But except that the areas I started working on quite far from the central area, well, today they've been completely abandoned. It's been 7 or 8 years since we've touched them, maybe even 8 or 9 years. For some areas there are places where we worked the first year, and then by the second year I realized it was too far and I wasn't going there anymore. So really that's the importance. Start slowly and small means doing a little in one focused area, not spreading small efforts everywhere. So that's the thing about starting small, it's really important, and I didn't respect it at all. Quick overview of mounds often discussed in permaculture. I'll share my stories, my experiences making mounds, including how, where, their shapes and why. Because I made quite a few mistakes with that. Some things did grow on them, but it wasn't very sustainable either. In my first year settling in, I built some mounds. I have no photos of those, so I'll just describe them, but I do have photos of the others. I made some mounds at the entrance of the garden, quite far from the central area, but next to the UCAM greenhouse, where I thought it was a good spot. I don't know why I made them in that direction. It seemed nice to me that way, so I made them along the slope. The opposite of what people say you should do nowadays. So there you go, the goals are already not in the right direction. The second or third year, I don't remember exactly, I don't have the dates in mind anymore, but at least a year or two later, we did a participatory work site. There were a lot of us. We had quite a few friends who were there to lend a hand. And we thought this was great and planned to set good goals. Back then, and still a little now, I used to go paragliding. We were flying. The plan was to someday fly high above the garden in a paraglider. There weren't any drones back then. It wasn't that long ago, but still there were no drones at that time to take pictures. We thought we'd occasionally fly over, take beautiful pictures and do something aesthetic. My garden is gently sloped. There are 2 spots in the garden where I dug trenches to bring in faucets so I could have water points. I decided to create mounds circling the water points with lower mounds circling in the opposite direction. And it looked, at least in the drawing, it looked nice. It looked like eyes, a mouth. Then I thought we'd make a big red flower shape like a poppy or tulip in the middle, a sort of clown nose. From above it looked like a clown face. The graphic aspect was beautiful. We never flew over it in a paraglider to take photos. And then what I noticed during the first winter that passed, the first big rainy period, is that the slightly curved shapes like this, which were in the direction of the slope, but not at all organized in relation to the flow of water or anything. The tops of the mounds were above or at the water's edge, so it worked there. Meanwhile, water accumulated on the lower curved parts of the mounds against the slope's direction. As a result, water nearly reached the tops of the mounds. So there you go, not at all in the right direction. Visually, I repeat, it was beautiful, but otherwise, how can I put it? It wasn't smart at all to do it that way anyway. So well, there you go, we ended up destroying them, all the work we put in to make that. One day I had a friend come over with a mini excavator to dig a small trench to run the phone cable. While he was here, I told him he could use the excavator to level these mounds, since we couldn't do anything with them. Anything we planted, especially perennials, would flood in winter and die by spring. The mounds that were too high and above the water dried out from lack of watering. Well, so in the end we got rid of that one. And we went back to the area where we made the mounds the first year, following the slope. Except that at that time, that's when I first started hearing a bit about permaculture. And I learned that you actually have to make them perpendicular to the slope instead. So we made them perpendicular to the slope. We took that kind of tool, I can't remember the name, it's a sort of big wooden triangle with a string hanging from the middle, you know, to mark the contour lines, to make sure the mounds are really on the contour lines. It was great, and at the same time, because that too was a mistake, you'll see why later. Meanwhile, we dug trenches and buried wood. The method, what's his name again? That's it, I forgot his name, but it'll come to me. Philippe Forer. He has a lot of experience with this. Burying wood in his beds is very productive. For me, the problem here is that I have a hydromorphic soil in the middle of winter, at least in this area. So in midwinter the soil is waterlogged. The wood we buried had no fungus and didn't decompose. Years later the wood remained unchanged and was actually stopping plants from growing. Burying it turned out to be more of a hindrance than a help. So yeah, not a good idea. And then the other thing we realized was about the placement of these mounds. Besides, the soil there was already hydromorphic and not ideal. It was still a very remote area from the central zone, and compared to the slope, it was a bit higher than a garden. This is the third time we've changed the goal location. I didn't count earlier, but it's there again. We thought it would be good to do it more or less in the direction of the slope, but on the other hand, it would be better to do it in the lowest part of the field, so that it can stay moist in the middle of summer when it doesn't rain anymore, when it's dry and all that. And so that's when we moved them again, saying it would be smarter to do it there. So we moved them once again. Some of those were beds, so from that point on I say beds, but from that time I would call them more like growing boards rather than beds. The first ones, well, the second ones we made, the first ones I have in a photo, that's where we brought our friends. We made beds that were maybe 2.5 meters wide and 1.2 meters high, something like that. The next ones were much lower, and the last ones are almost at ground level, pretty flat, because today I find it less and less logical to make raised beds, since it's a lot of work and energy to move that soil up. The slope sides of the bed make sowing and watering seeds impractical, and using a broad fork there isn't very practical either. Raised beds offer several benefits: increased soil depth, faster soil drying in spring, and quicker warming from south-facing slopes. But if you don't have all those needs, in the end there's not much point in making raised beds. Well, that's my point of view. As soon as we reach the wettest part of the garden, we use growing beds, and it's great. We took longer there to realize changes were still needed. But these are things we couldn't have easily noticed without experience. Now looking back with experience, I would have quickly realized that in that low part of the garden there was an area with little soil depth. So the plants that grew there were really pod plants, plants from dry and arid areas. There's a whole area where tomatoes, even with twice daily watering, produced nothing. They struggled. On the other hand, there's an area a bit farther and higher in the garden, still in the lower zone but slightly apart, where even without watering it looked beautiful and amazing. So there you go, last change. From now on maybe things will change again, but from this point we're really focused on that area. We're not in the closest, lowest area, but we're in the most productive area, the one closest to the living space. So that's the story of the goals. There have been many changes. There are many things, and I doubt I could have succeeded on the first try. It's experience that makes you notice that some things work and some things don't. The story of the buried wood. In some areas, not hydromorphic is a great technique. In others, it's not necessary. In other areas, it can be interesting, but you can still get effective results without it. So make mistakes and you'll see what works and what doesn't. No, that's it for the story about the goals. I'm also talking about this living area, which is the somewhat central area, close to the lower part of the garden. I have no idea. I can't even tell you today why I made it in that spot. Maybe, I don't know. It's about feeling a place that was perhaps like one of the few mostly flat spots where you could build a cabin on level ground. By digging and making small foundations or pads, we could have created a flat surface even on a slope. And today, looking back, I think that central area would have been good. Maybe it would have been better if it was closer to the road, closer to the access area. Well, that's it. It's not the most convenient place, except that now the cabin is built. I'm not going to move it. This is often said in design. The things we're going to set up, it's good to take the time before putting something in place that will be hard to move later. We can move things like a vegetable garden or growing area easily. It's no problem to put the beds somewhere else each year. It's a bit frustrating to think that we did all that work for nothing in that spot, but we'll be able to recreate it somewhere else. On the other hand, a building, something that can't be moved anymore, that's it. It's a bit harder to move, so it's much more frustrating to think that we could have done it somewhere else. We adapt the design to that, but once it's done, it's done. I'll now discuss the marks I've made in the garden, focusing on the water points. And from the beginning, even before being here at Le Jardin des Merveilles, when I was at the farm just next door, I had already started doing a few little things. There are friends of ours who had a shovel, a mini excavator or a backhoe, something big enough to dig holes. And then I already had the desire to make a pond, so I made my first pond over there, the first pond that never really existed since we were never able to fill it. The problem was that I had a tool available that could dig holes, and much bigger holes than with a shovel. So we made a huge hole, and then, well, after thinking about it and getting information here and there, that was it. The water wasn't going to stay in there. The soil was too sandy, not clayey, so it doesn't hold water. So we would have needed to buy a tarp. So I thought, well, great, let's find out more. I don't remember. The pond was meant to be around 10 to 12 meters wide and 2 meters deep. And as for the length out, I don't remember how much, something huge, you know. And actually, after I looked into it, there wasn't a tarp in that size. There was a way to glue things together and stuff like that to make it work. But, you know, the lifespan with those glued seams wasn't great. It wasn't the safest option back then. So not possible. And so, since my project didn't last at that place anyway, that pool was never able to be finished. It's still there, we haven't filled it in. See a kind of huge hole next to the old greenhouse, the old geodesic dome that I had built for myself over there. So yeah, a bit of a disappointment about that pool. I arrived here where I am today on this land, and it was the same when I moved in. We brought in a mini excavator to dig trenches, to lay pipes and conduits, to bring in water and to run the cable for electricity. And so this mini excavator, once it was there, I thought, this is great, we'll make a slightly smaller hole. We'll work based on the available tarp sizes, so I chose the widest size that was available. We built a pond about 4 meters wide and 1.5 meters deep, edges included. So it ended up being a large tarp, but in a standard size. The day I went to buy this top, the price they gave me was just, well, impossible. On top of that, it was just the beginning of the setup. Financially, it wasn't the best time, let's say not the richest period. So yeah, the top cost a fortune, and even today that pond is still there, dug out, ready to be finished. But since the top is so expensive, I couldn't do it. So now when I dig a pond, I buy the tarp first, and then I adjust the hole based on the tarp I already have. Once it's dug, we can put it in place immediately. And we do it all in one go like that. We just dug a pond over there, I checked the tarp sizes and have enough money to buy a wider one. We might be able to finish this first pond that was dug. But there you go, so make sure to get information first if you want to dig a pond. Is there already clay in the soil? Will it hold? If it doesn't hold, how will you ensure it does? How much will it cost you to do that? Sometimes material prices can be surprising. And it's a shame to spend time and energy preparing something, starting a project, only to realize in the end that you won't be able to finish it. There you go. Now, I don't know if you've been watching from the beginning. There are mistakes that I repeat several times, and I make them several times, never in the same way, never exactly the same mistake, but I like to repeat. I learn, I tell myself I learn a little more that way, maybe, I don't know. There you go. As for everything that's a bit about design and organization, now I'm going to talk to you more about the real side of things. Garden, farming, and all the agricultural mistakes I've made, I made a lot of them. There's one, well, there are a few that are a bit more significant, the ones that really stuck with me and make me think today about how to manage soil fertility. If you've seen, I recently made a few videos about soil fertility where I talk about how to make soil fertile. Since starting here, I've made a few specific mistakes regarding fertility in my own practices. I'll tell you about one related to excess nitrogen or fertility when you want to make something very rich. We know that if we add compost, if we add manure, it will be rich. We know that things will grow well. We have compost and manure available and want to use a lot. My mistake was here. A nearby farm can supply me with manure. I produce compost and I realized that when you put compost and manure, things grow well. And one year I made mounds, well, we made mounds with the people who were here, with a layer of manure on the ground, a layer of compost on top, thinking that the compost will kind of seed the manure and it will decompose. No, I'm telling you the opposite of my actions. Add a compost layer to seed the soil, a rich manure layer on top, then finish with another compost layer to cover everything. The compost starts breaking down the manure so it doesn't go directly into the soil. We considered this carefully. Grass clippings cover everything to boost microbes, add nitrogen, and then it's all mulched. Maybe a few weeks before, I don't remember exactly how long, but a few weeks before starting the cultivation. And then we started the cultivation in there, so we grew tomatoes, squash, mostly ipomoyas, I remember. And so there was a whole start of the season there where it was. But every time we had visitors, I remember going with friends who came to see us, and we showed them around the garden. One evening, using lamps and headlamps, we got excited about those plants. Squash with huge leaves I'd never seen before. Morning glories too. I don't have photos, but I'd never seen morning glory leaves like that. And we were really cracking up looking at those things and talking about them. But given the size of the foliage, the day those squash actually produce squash, but we're going to get crushed. The building is going to get crushed by the squash. We're going to have gigantic things. Well, anyway, we had a good laugh about it, except that we waited for those squash. There were some, I won't say there weren't, I think the plants still produced maybe one fruit each. Some didn't bloom, the morning glories, and others didn't produce many flowers. But in short, abundant dark green foliage full of nitrogen and very rich. So a lot of foliage, but when it comes to fruiting, almost nothing. So here really we see the effect of too much nitrogen, and we can see a bit of the lack of balance in the nutrients. In the soil it really needs to be balanced. A soil shouldn't have only nitrogen. Nitrogen is important for making foliage, for having strong plants that grow well. But that's not enough. You also need everything else. The mistake was too much nitrogen, so it didn't work. Now I'm going to talk about a point that we often discuss. In permaculture they say you need to plant a lot of mixed crops. I started doing that even before I heard about permaculture, when I was thinking about biodiversity. In any case, the plant diversity is important in your garden. The more diversity there is, the better it is. That's a message I often share. The more diversity there is, the more effective it is. I went too far with that message, even telling myself on my planting beds and cultivation mounds. Mix everything, vegetables, flowers, even wild plants if you want, but especially mix all the vegetables. I had just finished a training in organic market gardening where we were taught about crop rotations. The organization on the growing beds, with beds for each family, each type of vegetable. And I said to myself, no, I'm going to go against that. I don't want monoculture on my small growing bed. I don't want this little bed to be a monoculture. I want there to be diversity even there. Except that when it was time to harvest again, we picked cucumbers that weren't very big, a nice size and we thought, but except they were inedible. They were very bitter since they were pickles, not cucumbers. We mixed them up and got confused. We planted I don't know how many lettuces, but once the squash grew, the lettuces underneath, in the dark, they died. So that's what happens when you mix everything. In the end, it was really... the garden was beautiful, it was full of diversity, but when it came to harvesting, we didn't know what we were harvesting, we didn't know where anything was. There were woofers working here. When we said, let's pick some tomatoes, they asked, where are the tomatoes? There are some here, some there, and others farther away. As you search and lift leaves, you get completely lost in the garden. For harvesting efficiency, you instantly know where your stuff is instead of taking 3 minutes. There's a bit of everything, but you have to search through the jungle not knowing where anything is. So there you go, but I still want to make something clear about the message saying permaculture requires mixing everything together. Permaculture is based on ethics like caring for nature and people and sharing surplus, but it doesn't involve mixing. And then there are permaculture principles which say to encourage biodiversity, to work with nature and not be stupid. There are many tips and messages, but none say you must mix everything together. I think that's a misunderstanding a lot of people have, or shortcuts that have been made between various ideas where people think you have to mix them. So we'll mix crops since monoculture isn't ideal and won't plant several together. There you go, be careful with that. Mixing things is good to a point in specific ways, spaces and times. But mixing everything together in a single field, no, that's not very profitable. It makes a nice ornamental garden for a certain area with ornamental plants, it's pretty, why not? But for vegetable production, you shouldn't go too far with that idea. That's all for that. Now, some mistakes I've made with certain plants, as some types of plants I've grown, for example, kiwis. For now, I don't have any kiwis in production here in the garden. I've been trying to grow them for years. I planted kiwis the first year, but they couldn't handle the drought. In the summer, they survived just barely. I barely watered them, assuming they'd take root on their own. And as a result, I ended up in the fall with very, very weak plants that died during the winter. And I repeated that the next year, telling myself spring wasn't the time to plant. I planted them in the fall. First winter then, the small plants that I had just put in the ground, the first winter, the frost calmed them down, they didn't come back in the spring. And a third time when I planted them in the fall, well covered during the first winter. And as a result, they survived well. The following summer, it held up pretty well, except for some varieties. So some varieties didn't hold up as well and ended up dying. So those are the lessons I can share about this, well, the things I've learned. First of all, don't plant perennials in spring unless you water them well the first summer. Planting in fall is better, but protect young plants. Even if a plant is hardy once it's mature, that doesn't mean that when they're young, they're the same. So make sure to protect them well during the first winter. The following summer, if it's a plant that hasn't rooted well yet, you still need to water it thoroughly. And on top of that, choose varieties that are resistant to your local temperatures. If it's colder at your place than the nursery, the plants might survive there or at your friends' places who have them. They might not survive at your place, so keep that in mind. I've been caught out by that several times. I also tried to grow blueberries during my first years here, so I bought a lot of blueberry plants. Black currants, red currants, small fruits. Well, the black currants and red currants did really well, but the blueberries didn't make it. After a few months, they looked bad and eventually died. There you go. So, after looking into it a bit, blueberries grow in acidic soil. Here my soil is only slightly acidic. Neutrality is at 7, mine is at 6.5. Below 7 is acidic, so mine is just barely below 7. It's great for small fruits, for vegetables, for a vegetable garden, it's perfect, but for blueberries it doesn't work. There are now varieties that thrive better in more neutral soils. There you go, I have some plants there and we'll try them out. I'll share more feedback later. another experiment with tomatoes. So I grow tomatoes, they're one of the classic vegetables in the garden. And I've tried a lot of methods, some work, some don't. The methods I've tried are staking, removing suckers and stuff like that. So here, really the classic one, well, this one, no doubt about it, it works fine. The same method, but without removing the suckers. It grows large bushes and many small fruits. The tomatoes are smaller and sometimes less sweet, but not always. And the tomatoes, even if they stay small, they're good. That works too. I use just grids, no staking or anything else, after seeing it at a market garden or friend's place. He buys those to put on concrete slabs. So it's bent a little bit into an alcove like this, so it's placed on the ground. We plant the tomatoes, we put that on top, the tomato will grow above and then crawl over it. Well, that worked very well, except after that I couldn't keep those grids. Well, I didn't find that very practical, and then I tried the method where you do nothing, you plant tomatoes and just let them grow. On the other hand, there was no production at all, and the plants died quickly. The beginning of the year was a bit wet. There's nothing to produce. So what did I learn? Different methods have different results. Some succeed, some don't. And by trying these same methods from one year to the next, it's not always the same ones that work. It's also important to consider the upcoming weather and climate. When it's very humid, everything at ground level will die. Recently, I replanted some types of tomatoes because I had extra plants. We plant them throughout the garden, some grow, some don't. And when it's not too damp, generally it's better. And when it's more damp, they die, so there you go. You have to consider that too. Some tomato varieties grow very well that way. So yeah, also consider, as I was saying, with kiwis and so on, really look at the different varieties. Just because a method doesn't work, doesn't mean it will never work. Depending on the climate, it will work differently, and depending on the varieties, it might also work differently. So take all of that into account. Now I'm going to share with you some mistakes, some big mistakes that I've made regarding irrigation. I've done this without irrigation from the beginning. Now it's raining, and I hope the noise won't be an issue. I've been doing it for a very long time. Now I'm starting to irrigate a little bit again. You know, in my first year doing market gardening, I wanted to irrigate, so I bought pipes and sprinklers instead of using drip irrigation. I wanted a humid, jungle-like vibe in my garden. So I irrigated all my areas, vegetables with the machete that waters everywhere, and wide enough for a humid garden. We're in a very dry region here in Vaur called the Kose. So there isn't much water. The only water I had available, no water tank, no well, no river nearby. I have a well, there's a well at the farm next door where I drove from, a hose where I can get a little water but not enough. To irrigate a whole field, it's just a little bit to water my greenhouse. So for the big watering needed for market gardening, I used water from the main supply, the water I pay for. So I watered from spring until it was around July, I think early July, so not even the start of the harvest yet. I hadn't gotten any tomatoes, eggplants or peppers yet. Nothing was producing. And so one day a man from the village hall came to tell me, I'm sorry Remy, due to the drought we have water restrictions. People can't fill pools or wash cars, among other things. It's just the bare minimum for farms and animals. You to water the greenhouse a little bit, but on the other hand, for open field irrigation with sprinklers, that's it. You have to stop there or we'll run out of water. If we keep going, eventually there won't be any water left. Above all, you won't be able to pay the bill at year's end. And that's not how, I don't think you realize how much it costs, and with everything you're using, you'll have a problem with your bill. So I can tell you that at the time, with my dreams as a young market gardener just starting out, and I'm going to prove to the whole world that you can produce using somewhat eco-friendly methods and all that, but still by watering a little bit, of course. It was a big disappointment. I had to stop watering, so I did. And so inevitably all the vegetables ended up dying, especially since they were used to being watered until then, so everything died. So zero vegetable production and a water bill of 2,500 euros that I got at the end of the year. That plus what I mentioned earlier, the first years I was here financially I was barely scraping by, or even way below scraping by. So it took me maybe 3 years to pay that bill, something like that. I also watered my greenhouse, adding to that bill. Other bills came later, so I paid part each time and postponed the rest. But there were other things to pay for. It turned into a kind of financial snowball. where it was extremely hard for me to recover. As I often say, it's been 3 or 4 years for me, and the project is becoming increasingly profitable. But the first years, and with that which really put me in a tough spot, it was a bit rough. So yeah, a big mistake. It taught me a lot, and now it's teaching me how to irrigate, how to limit watering, how to adapt the ecosystem so it can withstand less watering. But yeah, that one, I remember that mistake well. Another mistake that's not necessarily related to the crops, but that's related to me, to my resilience with my vegetables, my plants, so with the seeds. And so a little nod to someone this happened to. I saw it in a video, Damien, about some seeds. So I produce quite a lot of my own seeds. There are several plants where I was fooled in the early years. I remember, for example, Cosmos sunflowers. I had some really nice varieties. And I really let the seeds ripen on the plant. And then when I came to the plants to collect my seeds, well, there was nothing left. The birds had eaten everything. From afar, the sunflowers looked beautiful, but up close, I saw the plants drying and curling up. I thought, now the seeds will ripen. I'll let them mature as long as possible for the best seeds. Well, except I was dreaming a little. When I reached the sunflowers, almost all the seeds were gone, with just a few left in the center and on the sides. Looking closer at those seeds, I thought the birds left me some this time, but they only left seeds that weren't viable. There was nothing inside, they were empty, so that's it. The Cosmos flowers, same thing, they ate everything as they went along. So the mistake of leaving too much in place without protecting it, it doesn't work. So I told myself to change a bit, doing it before it's fully ripe or just starting to ripen. Actually, when I see that the birds start going after it, that's when I cut it and hang it up to dry in my shed. Second mistake, they still pursue them in the shed since they can smell them. Birds were eating the seeds from the hanging sunflowers. The mice would eat all the seeds kept in small envelopes and dishes for drying. So I had quite a lot of my seeds eaten. Now I'm careful, but I also don't want to barricade everything, to lock everything up just so nothing gets eaten. We're in the garden and our kitchen opens to the outside. As soon as we let things grow back, things get eaten, we get stuff eaten. And by the cats, the ones that come at night. We don't have cats, but there are wild cats that come and eat at night. When we put things, even in the oven, leftover cake or whatever, we think it's safe in the oven, but there are still mice that come and eat them. Sometimes seeds are stored. We have a seed library, stored in small drawers with a tiny edge to pull them out using your finger. The hole is very small. The mice get in there, they go eat, they chew on the seed packets and they eat the seeds inside the packets, and then when we don't notice right away, we take out the seeds. It reeks of mouse urine. This mistake is apparently common and I'm not the only one who's experienced it. That's it for this batch. I've made plenty of mistakes with my crops and other things. Like I said, maybe I'll make more videos about it. I'll tell you about a recent mistake involving some activities. At Le Jardin des Merveilles, we organize activities, host classes, and welcome schools, groups, and children, doing a lot with kids. And I got caught up in the desire to always do more, which is something pretty typical for me. I like to do more, but sometimes I get caught up and the mistake I made, so that's on me. The first year I visited the schools myself to do activities with the kids. It was great. The following years, well, the next year, I felt the garden was ready to welcome visitors. It was nice. So I brought groups of children to the garden. The nearby Vaur school came once or twice. Some small day camps, so very small groups of children. Great, I really liked it, so I decided to start a project with activities and entertainment for the children. I created a brief intro file about myself and possible activities. After sharing it, I received some responses from schools, from Toulouse and from Montauban. Toulouse is just over an hour away and Montauban is about 45 minutes from the garden. So when a school comes to a place like this, they have a budget, and in the budget there's the rental, well, the bus service. So there's a 50-seat bus that comes. And when they rent a 50-seat bus to come do an activity, they're not going to pay a lot for a 50-seat bus just to fill it halfway. They come with a full bus. So here these are groups of 50 children who came. And there you go. I remember the first time we did that, and then the second time, because that's how it was organized. We received 2 groups like that. At that point, I couldn't do any activities. It was just too much. I wasn't surprised that day since it was planned, but that's when I realized the mistake. I love doing activities with kids, I really do. We plan an activity, but we know how to adapt to other things. We're making a mandala with leaves, but then a little beetle walks across it. We'll tell the story of the beetle, and that's fine. We completely change direction. So I have certain skills. I was able to do that. On the other hand, the woofers, the people who came for internships and had just arrived, who were new and didn't really know all this, they didn't have that ability to adapt. That day with 50 kids, I stopped animating and started managing the animators. Rather than leading 10-12 kids myself, I led 10-12 animators, each supervising 5 kids. That day was chaotic because not all the animators handled the activities well. Some of them did things that were a bit questionable, even a little dangerous. Some kids almost got burned. A jar with boiling water was shaken to mix it, but since it was boiling, the jar exploded. The counselor ended up with his hand half burned, and the kids, they were scared of him, but luckily not burned, which would have been disastrous. So there you go, the danger is already there of poor management. And then for me, the frustration of not being in contact with the kids at all, but instead just running from group to group to see how things are going. That's the urge to always do more. That was kind of a mistake. That's all for the animations. I won't go into detail since there would be more mistakes. I'm also going to talk to you now about the mistakes I made in my productions. And still with this desire to always do more, because you see, that's something that's recurring with me. The desire to always do more, always do better and too much, and that just doesn't work. When I started working again, it was at Permaculture, where I had a small geodesic dome to grow my plants. It was 10 meters in diameter, 9 meters in diameter, something like that. So you see, it's not a huge amount that you can produce in there, but I still managed to fill it up pretty well. I sold my plants at the markets, it was nice. And when I arrived here at Le Jardin des Merveilles, the first things that were done, it's the cabin greenhouse, and so this greenhouse is a little less than 250 square meters. And there I find myself with a greenhouse, huge and impressive. I think, wow, I can produce a lot here, it'll be great. And I filled my greenhouse with zucchini, tomatoes and various crops. And at the markets, when it came time to sell them, I still had my little village market and I sold a tenth, not even of what I produced. I'm not even going to say how big the compost pile was by year's end. There was someone from AD Art who was in charge of my setup and then saw that and told me no, but that's how it is. I don't know if he actually used the word dramatic, but in my mind today that's really the impression I got from it. The farmer who produces in bulk seedlings but can't manage to sell them, and all the work I did all year to produce that, well, it just turned into compost for me. Great, the production. There you go, hundreds of tomato, zucchini and squash plants, basically everything I grew were thrown away. You see, knowing how to manage production in relation to the sales you'll be able to make afterwards, managing whether the product can be preserved, how long it will need to be sold in, and in what quantity. You'll be able to sell, and knowing that ahead of time lets you say, okay, if you can sell that, then you produce just a bit more. Telling yourself there will be some losses, but there you go, you won't overdo it either. Having a 200 or 250 square meter greenhouse doesn't mean you must fill it, since you might not sell everything. That's it, big mistake. I've made it several times. That was the work. Never that much, only in later years. I produced a lot, I threw away a lot, and then I started to get a little bit known and I managed to sell a little more. There was also a time during the season when I had so many requests that I ran out of things to sell. So now I managed to adjust more or less to what I know I'm going to sell. The idea is to have a slight shortage at the end of the season to make sure there's no surplus. Not to have worked for nothing, but to have as little shortage as possible so I can supply everyone, even at the end of the season. Now what I do is produce a little more broadly. And at the end of the season, when I know I won't be selling much anymore, well, I offer what's left, I plant the last ones, and then I end up with almost no losses. My other mistake was related to the market I was in. When I started, the village had a small family market, so no organization was needed. You sell your stuff there, but there's no manager. We organize ourselves, and still sales aren't great, so I had that market and then another market. No, I didn't do that one immediately. There's a nearby village where I used to live and know some people. And then there were people who got together to organize a new market in that place. My market was on Thursday in the village, not Saturday afternoon. And this new market being created here, well, that's it, being created. So at the first markets, there were just 2 or 3 people passing by. You sell 3 to 5 tomato plants when they want a few, but not more. So basically, almost 0 sales. And alongside that, a new market then. My partner at the time was doing a market in Salvagnac. So what, about 3/4 of an hour's drive from here, something like that, if I'm not mistaken, so quite far, already not very logical, but not very profitable for investments. And then as a result, especially over there, nobody knows me. So to sum up, 3 markets a week, a small village market on Thursday morning, here in Vaur on Saturday morning. A market very far from my home, where it was a nice market, but where I wasn't known. So I didn't sell much, and on Saturday afternoon, a new market being set up in a nearby village where I didn't sell anything. So 3 markets a week means a lot of time spent trying to sell and 0 sales. So not enough time to work in the garden here, and then a lot of time at the market where I didn't sell anything. Not profitable at all. I've stopped going to markets that don't work. My little village market, I do it once in a while. I do pay what you want sales for friends, neighbors, all that. But I don't do it all the time. And on the other hand, I do 2 markets a week, and those are markets that work well. Out of those 2, there's one that's working less and less. So I might stop, we'll see. But anyway, that's it. It's about knowing how to have the right amount of products to sell, like I was saying, but also having the right places to sell them. You know, that's something to think about. And another mistake then that comes to mind regarding the products I sell, I made early on. I always wanted to do very original things and stand out from the ordinary. So aromatic plants that come from a bit of everywhere, Brett Mafan from Reunion, Epazote from Mexico, Shiso from China, from Asia. Well, there you go, lots of very original plants. But in the end, people find it funny, and some of them take a little. Sometimes you meet people from there who know them and take some. But otherwise, it's not with that you make a living. Along with various vegetables, there were unique squashes and rare old tomato varieties. Back then, green and black Krim tomatoes didn't sell much. People wanted Cœur de Bœuf, Saint-Pierre and Marmande, you know, things that were a bit more well-known. So yeah, I didn't manage to sell much because I wanted to make niche products, things that were a bit too original, and that just didn't work. So today things have changed. I managed to sell things that are a bit more original because I'm known for that, and people come looking for me. Collections of plants that are a bit original because they've experimented with these plants since then and they're able to do things with them. But at first it was a bit tough. Consider this ahead of time. If you want to sell products, knowing the quantities and locations of production and whether people will want to buy those products, you should also consider that some early mistakes I made were due to my sales approach. At the markets, you may have already heard this. Many people there who they walk by unsure if they'll buy. Deep down they know they won't, but hesitate to admit it. And the thing like, well, are you still here at the end of the market? Maybe I'll come back, but the whole, can you hold it for me, I'll return thing, that means maybe I want to buy it if I want to buy it. I hope he hasn't sold it yet, but I'm unsure about buying it, so I won't pay. If he holds it for me, great, I'll ask. And the seller was so nice and naive, I almost asked who? Him? Well, he doesn't know, and then, okay, I'll put it aside, and then at the end of the market, nobody comes back. In the end, I didn't sell the products I set aside. I may not be able to keep or sell them later. They pulled that trick on me, not even at the markets, but in the garden. People who call or message me at the market, if you want me to set something aside, they'll pick it up in a few days. And then the tomato plants, or I don't remember what it was at the time, I think there were quite a few tomatoes and zucchinis. Once it's in a pot, and if it's not planted within the next 2 weeks, if 2 or 3 weeks go by and it's not planted, it's no longer sellable. Anyway, when it's in a pot, it doesn't look good. I've lost many products that way, just setting them aside repeatedly. Now, what I do is, okay, you want to buy it? I'll set it aside for you, but you pay for it, and it's set aside, you come back to pick it up later. But if you don't pay for it and someone else wants to buy it from me, well, I have that product here to sell and I want to make a living with it too. So I can't keep it for you too long either if you're not sure about buying it. The same thing with the workshops we organize. We do cooking workshops, we do workshops. So there are some workshops that we charge for. And until not long ago, we used to take reservations like that. Okay, you want to join the workshop, we sign you up. And then on the day of the workshop or the day of the walk, the day we're going to do this thing, we had a limited number of spots. And out of those 8 to 10 limited spots, well, half of them wouldn't show up. There was a waiting list, but by the time of the event, it was too late to contact them, so that was it. We held workshops or outings with 3 or 4 people, since others might have had other plans. Didn't feel like coming, or, well, had some issue, whatever it was. But now it seems many people have more of a consumer mindset. You can take everything, you take everything, and in the end, if it's free, you take it. Then if you don't need it, you just leave it lying around. And then if you can sign up for something without paying, you just sign up like that. If I want to go that day, I have my spot, but if I don't, it's fine since it didn't cost me anything. So now today, when we do things, we used to charge or ask for partial payment at registration, but I think we don't do that anymore. No, for paid workshops, we always charge the full amount up front. You'll pay the rest when you arrive, so just pay then, and you won't need to worry about money that day. Also, we offer some services for free. The number of spots is unlimited, so we don't have issues with availability on the day. All of that was part of learning. We made mistakes before reaching our current organization. That's everything. Some big mistakes, and there are other small mistakes, more personal ones, but I won't talk to you about those in detail. But more personal stories or life choices that we're going to make. For me, I've been working on this project for 10 years. I nearly quit this project at first and almost gave up everything for a girl, but I didn't. I continued with this project, and then I told myself there's not a single girl who will make me give up my project. And then after that, I left other girls, I ended other relationships because my project was more important than anything. Now I've found balance, or at least someone who suits me better. But above all, I found myself, and I found a way of doing things that suits me. But you see, all these mistakes are more personal and intimate ones. So that's why I keep this for the end of the video, because usually not many people are watching at this point. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing, hearing and sharing my mistakes with me. If you're interested and I make other mistakes that seem interesting to me, I'll share more videos where I'll talk to you about my mistakes. In any case, thank you for watching until now. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to share it with others and talk about it. If you enjoy it, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or give it a thumbs up. Both are appreciated. Why blue thumbs? Facebook uses blue for thumbs up. Is it brief or not? And if you like it, you can also support me on the Tipeee platform. So thank you very much. More and more of you are supporting on the platform. So thanks to you, I can keep doing this. Thanks for watching the videos. See you soon for the next one. Bye.